Hey everybody, Joe here, Psychedelics Today. Thanks for tuning in. Today we have a show discussing the Psychedelic Shine event just last week in Boulder. It was really fun. February 2016 for those of you listening in the future. It was a great event. Dennis McKenna was kind of the headliner. There's plenty of others. So this is a unique interview. Well, I guess it's not even an interview. It's just an episode of a podcast because it's just me. I was recording and broadcasting on Facebook Live. So if you want to watch my face, go over to our Facebook page and you'll see it on there as well. So without further ado, since we don't have too much to say, I'll cut to the support comments and then cut to the show. If you want to support us, follow us on Facebook, tell your friends about the show, sign up for our email list. You can find that on our website, psychedelicstoday.com. If you want to reach out, website or our email is psychedelicstodayemail@gmail.com. Thanks for tuning in. Have a great rest of your day. Hope you enjoy what we put together here. On the Psychedelic Shine event in Boulder that I went to last Sunday, Daniel McQueen's Medicinal Mindfulness Group put it on, and it was a fantastic event. I really had a great time going, and I really hope they keep it going and do more in the future. I know they do regular smaller events, but this was in the Boulder Theater, which is a substantial venue in Colorado. So it was really neat to be part of it and get to meet a lot of folks in the community. Before we go too deep into that, I just want to do a quick shout out that this is the Psychedelics Today podcast. This is the video version, I guess. I'll be podcasting this, so if you don't want to watch the whole video, check out Psychedelics Today later on today. And you can download the audio from iTunes or wherever. Check it out. What we have coming up in the near future, a bunch of really cool interviews we've got on the books. Might even be able to score the famous Jim Fadiman. And Kyle and I are actually teaching a course right now on psychedelic self-care and integration, which is really awesome. We've got a pre-recorded version and a live version. Got a really great community of folks in both, and really looking forward to see how that shakes out. Our first classes were delivered on Monday and just yesterday. That'll go for a few weeks, and I think, what else? I've got a breathwork workshop this upcoming Saturday, and a lot of folks from Denver and all over are going to come up for that, and that's really awesome. And I've got a bunch of other dates recently announced. You can check it out at Breckenridge Breathwork, breckbreath.com, or just Facebook, Breckenridge Breathwork. So check that. So, on to the important stuff. I think I was convinced just by hanging out at the event that I'm going to start a psychedelic club in Summit County. So meeting once a week, every other week, something, whatever we can handle. And I'm really excited to help develop the community around here and see what happens. It was the event, Psychedelic Shine, was kind of opened by a live musician and kind of a keynote by Kelsey, who's I think a CU grad that helps out medicinal mindfulness and maps a bunch. And then it was opened by a panel of Psychedelic Club students. So people studying at Naropa or CU Boulder. And, it was really fascinating. They talked about what excites them about the future of psychedelics, integrating drugs into virtual reality, hypnosis with or without psychedelics, and the beneficial effects of all of that. Using VR for therapy in conjunction with psychedelics could be very effective. It's going to be a while before we can probably do too much experimentation with that, but it should be really, really cool to see how that plays out. Hoping to have a number of those folks on the show in the near future and connect with them and do some breath work with them. So that'll be really cool. I also got to, if you're not familiar, the Rooster is kind of like a Colorado magazine. I think of it more like a Boulder magazine, but I guess they're branching out all over the place. And I got to meet up with this reporter, Reilly, and Reilly Capps writes for the Rooster on drugs and psychedelics. So anything from underground MDMA therapy, he can interview therapists, and also I think he talks about ayahuasca some on there, but check him out, Reilly Capps. I think he's going to be a guest on the show in the near future too. Really great to connect with him. It was actually really interesting to see a number of reporters a number of reporters come on the show, at the event, and see that they're willing to write about a lot of this stuff. That's really neat to me, because I always assumed it was kind of underreported. So who knows? Maybe that's changing, because the founder of the Psychedelic Club, I think James Casey, was on, I believe it was an ABC affiliate in Denver, talking about his MDMA therapy. So he's written about it too. So it's really, really kind of cool to see that. What else? Oh, here's the flyer for the event that we got when we showed up. It was really neat. Kind of magical cup of tea with a key on it. Psychedelic Shine. Celebrating psychedelic successes. And yeah, it was kind of the schedule. It was really cool. So yeah, the musical opener was Kimba, Arem. It was really neat. Kind of crystal bowl / didgeridoo. I think she does some live music with medicinal mindfulness. I'm not positive on that. Correct me if I'm wrong, people. But it was really neat to have that as an opener. And the folks in that panel I was talking about, the opening panel, are not listed here, unfortunately. Yeah, Psychedelic Club panel is what they wrote. But then we had a really cool talk from Daniel McQueen, who you've heard on this show, medicinal mindfulness, kind of cannabis-induced, full-spectrum cannabis. So, blending a bunch of sativa or indica dominant strains together to get a full-spectrum effect, kind of going over your limit and doing it in a nice, safe container with a particular intent. And then the morning session was closed by Rianne Havens, PhD, who is a fascinating speaker, incredibly brilliant, and you're going to hear from him on this show for sure. He's got a lot of stuff where he's talking about healing the gut biome, how close the body is to being able to produce massive amounts of endogenous tryptamines or DMT, because you have tryptophan in there, and the gut biome is only like a few things away from a few molecular chemical shifts away from making those tryptamines. So we're we're right there. So he's really working on that. It seems really focused on that, which is really, really neat to me. So what else was going on? Yeah, let me show you some of the swag I pulled up. Really cool vendors there. Gorilla Healing. Cannabis Emergency Relief Fund. It looks like they're doing some stuff supporting veterans with cannabis. There's probably a lot of other stuff going on there. Yeah. Cannabis refugees. There is this concept of people moving to Colorado or states where there's recreational or medical marijuana available because their children have seizures, and CBD THC hybrids are the only thing that make them stop having seizures. I've met a number of these people that moved to the state for that, and it's really interesting. So there is this idea of people coming here as a refugee. So that's fascinating. So they're working on that. Max from the Trichome Institute, a really interesting guy. They all at the event claimed that Max knows more about trichomes than anybody else. Trichomes are kind of like the flavor in pot. There's around 200 molecules, they said, that make up trichomes in marijuana, but there's thousands of trichomes in other plants. They also gave me this really cool pen. What they do is education for bud tenders, stuff like that, and employees at marijuana stores, and really helping them to really level up their game. It's a brave new frontier that people are kind of jumping into. It's only a handful of years old, over here at least, where we have to take new employees and get them up to speed on how to sell this stuff or help the customers understand what they're looking for, perhaps, and how the flavor interacts with stuff. So Rianne, from that talk about the gut biome, stuff like that, he actually pointed to Max from Trichome as an expert in trichomes, all things trichomes. So one question was asked, how do we know, like, say, for example, we wanted to shape a breathwork or a ayahuasca experience through the use of trichomes, because the concept was that trichomes are actually shaping the way your your marijuana high looks and feels. So perhaps there's a way to design that using other plant medicines or breath work, for instance. So really interesting stuff there. Trichome Institute. Check it out if you want to get some professional education on marijuana stuff. Let's see. Yeah, I got to meet Alyssa Gursky. She was on that panel we talked about. She's a student right now with Naropa and doing some MAPS work too with the MDMA study, and doing, I think she just completed her first Groff Transpersonal Training holotropic breathwork course. So that's really neat. Yeah, brilliant lady. Got her card. It was fantastic to get people's cards and be able to connect with them later. Alyssa, I think, is going to be a strong player in this movement for a while. Let's see. And then this was unexpected. There is live artists all over the place. And this was the one that kind of impressed me the most. They took the lights down quite a bit. Antlife.space. Antlife.space. Yeah. Two-sided card. It's pretty sweet. What they were doing was creating these paintings, I guess, with galactic looking backdrops and having an ant farm in the front. It was kind of this commentary on our experience, or Daniel described it this way at least, like we're these 3D, 4D entities, traveling in a three-dimensional space through the fourth dimension, which is time. And, in a sense, we're looking at these ants as if they are us from a higher dimension. So suggesting of higher dimensional entities other than human intelligence is kind of informing what's going on in the higher dimensional realms outside of what we're aware of. Psychedelics might be able to make us aware of that kind of stuff in the future. So again, antlife.space, super neat art. He had like two set up. One was on the side of the stage with some really cool lighting, and one was off in the back in like the vendor space if you wanted to get a little closer to it. I think that's it for swag from the event. I didn't scoop up anything. I was kind of short on energy and attention when I was there, but it was still a really cool event. Really, again, appreciate Daniel having me come out to represent psychedelics today, and got to meet a lot of people. So then there was like a lunch break. They had some music. The band was Nibumbu, something like that. Nibumbu. And that was pretty cool. And then there was some poetry. I got to reconnect with a friend, Matt Bovard, from my Evolver coordination days. He's running a poetry group and magazine called New Revolutions, KNEW Revolutions. Check him out online. He's a pretty good poet and putting out a lot of stuff that could be of interest to you. If you're deep in this world and appreciate poetry, you'll probably appreciate what's going on there. And the magazine, keep an eye out for it. It's going to be pretty interesting. A lot of great art. I got to see a demo, sample copy, and it's really nice looking, and I think it's going to be great. So opening the afternoon session, somebody that blew me away, Carla Clements, PhD, transpersonal counseling professor at Naropa, and independent rater for the MAPS Phase 3 study. So she's going to be in charge of one of the Phase 3 MDMA sites, and she also got to do some of the, I think, Phase 2 work that was going on in Boulder, maybe also the Phase 1. But she got to speak to how impressive the healing was that was happening during her sessions. I was very impressed, and she spoke with great intelligence, social intelligence, and gave a lot of heart out during the talk about how much healing people were going through. People who couldn't sleep and couldn't go out in public were, napping, finally taking really good high quality sleep. And, some of them even went and traveled the world, learned vacation, hung out with friends without feeling like a weirdo for the first time, stuff like that. It was a really great talk. So keep an eye out for Carla Clements. I really hope I'm able to connect with her in Boulder and give you guys an interview from her, because she has a lot of wisdom to share. I think that's really, really kind of cool. So that was great. And then Daniel McQueen of medicinal mindfulness, who I've spoken about a lot already, kind of jumped into these two concepts of naming the substances a little different, because his work with medicinal mindfulness, it doesn't really look like what people are doing traditionally with marijuana. They're doing, high doses, full spectrum blends of marijuana and doing it in an intentional way. It doesn't look like at all what's traditionally thought of as marijuana use. So that he wanted to come up with a name, and he's calling it trans cannabis now, because it's kind of beyond the realm of what we usually consider cannabis use. And the other thing that kind of blew me away was his concept of cyber DMT. He was saying, like, let's take the epitome of what we have right now, like the highest end of what we have in the medical world, which really is anesthesiology equipment, and see, what? Okay, so backing up a little bit, Rick Strassman's DMT work was limited, or I guess the therapeutic potential for intravenous DMT use is limited by the half-life of the substance, and the being that you take the substance and it's gone in 10 to 30 minutes, you're back to normal, kind of. So his idea is, let's set up this whole, he had this whole dialogue about space exploration, and, the impulse of psychonauts is really the same as for astronauts. Like, how do we create a NASA for psychedelics, for instance? So it's going to be a little while legally, but, he was encouraging folks in the room, there's a lot of young people there, if you're going to be a doctor, be an anesthesiologist, and be ready to use this high-end anesthesia equipment to create a steady dose of DMT in your system for as long as you choose. Really intense, but also it pushes the limits of what we think is possible. Because in ayahuasca, you're not reaching those same concentrations of DMT in the blood. It's a very different thing. But what happens if you stay in there for an hour, 5 hours, 8 hours, or longer? What would we discover? What if we had these high-end astronauts, psychonauts that were very well trained, very experienced, and could handle it and come back and integrate the experience safely? Hopefully. What if we did? And then let's have some sort of container to make this possible. And there's a really good chance we'd learn some very interesting things, at the very least, about the brain, if not the universe. So Daniel spent a while talking about that and how that could be achieved in the future. And I was really happy to hear that he said breathwork had a part to play in that. Because how do we, right now legally train people? And it's through breathwork or cannabis. And they're both very kind of different medicines. Breathwork being more body, maybe, and cannabis also being body-oriented, psychedelics, but breathwork being more about clearing out stuff in your body, so that when you're in these more highly charged states, that you can handle them more safely. So that was really neat to hear. I really appreciate it. And then Dennis McKenna jumped in and started blowing all of our minds, talking about how the primate brain, it's a talk you may have heard before. The primate brain really just boosted in size substantially after we started using psychedelics. And it's still kind of a theory. It's not totally proven, but it seems to make sense. How else did rapid evolution occur on the scale of thousands of years versus millions? And it's really important to think about. Then maybe we can keep using this stuff because psychedelics got us into this mess, through increased brain size. Maybe we can continue to use it to get us out of this ecological, social catastrophe scenario we have going on. Crony politics, bad environmental policy, really, really scary population and weapons stuff happening. So maybe psychedelics, if we keep using them and keep pushing and keep integrating, keep doing the work, that we can come back and do some really important stuff in the future. And that was kind of the gist of his talk. There's a lot more to it. And drugs are us. Salvador Dali said at one point, "No, I do not take drugs. I am drugs." Because your whole body is just a cascade of chemical reactions. And to not accept that is kind of tricky. So pay attention to that. And then they had a really cool panel that closed it out. Daniel, McQueen, Rien, Carla, and Dennis McKenna sat on this panel and fielded questions from everybody, and it was kind of neat. I got the opportunity to ask Dennis McKenna about what he has been up to and what are his thoughts on the Cyber DMT. So his thoughts on the Cyber DMT is it's interesting. It'll probably eventually happen, but what's the actual use? Like, why would we want to do that when we have mushrooms, which are kind of effectively orally active DMT? And we can do it now. With modern extraction methods, we could probably just eat straight psilocybin or psilocin in capsule form and be able to go to these higher doses. Terrence always talked about 5 dried grams. What if you're able to extract it and have the equivalent of like 70? You're approaching that territory of Cyber DMT at that point. So you want to be experienced, but we have the technical ability to do that. Maybe it's not legal, but we could still do it. So something to think about there. And then I thought he was doing a bunch of research in the Amazon. Apparently he's doing retreats. I think he's set up with some retreat center in South America, and he's doing that semi-regularly, leading retreats and bringing people down there and then kind of getting out of the way so people can have their own experience. And so he's not driving it and making them have a influenced experience. So that's really neat. What else? The panel was interesting because people were talking about all sorts of different things. There's a paraplegic guy who has nerve pain now, like substantial, I think, spasms and seizures when using any psychedelic drug, which I've never heard of before. He's kind of a recent paraplegic, so maybe there's some nerve stuff going on that needs to clear up before he can get back to normal with that. But, something to experiment with. And then there was a gentleman with chronic regional pain syndrome. So it's kind of, he doesn't know what's causing the pain. It's kind of neurogenic or maybe even psychosomatic in origin. We don't know for sure, but he was talking about how he used to be able to use drugs fairly regularly, including marijuana, and he can't do it all that well now. He was asking them for very specific medical advice, which I think is risky in a conference setting. But what they ended up suggesting was, really low dose MDMA and maybe really low dose marijuana use, and not just CBD. He's on CBD daily, but CBD alone has this, it's a little lacking. You have this entourage effect where the molecule can, or the combination of the full plant has a better, stronger, more complete effect than just an isolated individual compound. So that's the entourage effect, and that's pretty much what they left him with. And they told him to not lose hope because he was suggesting that he was really hopeless and at the end. So that was very interesting to hear them say, just don't give up, keep pushing. Major strides are made through small individual actions over time. They accumulate over time and have great effect in the long run. And then I got to chat with all sorts of folks, got to connect with some people from the Psychedelic Club after the event, had a nice dinner with one of them. And I'm really excited to go down to the Denver Psychedelic Club, meet up with all those folks. I'll probably make it out to some of the Boulder Psychedelic Club events and see how that goes. So that's really the essence of what's going on. And I'm, again, really grateful that Daniel put it on and invited me out. And really glad I put in the effort to make it down there. It's about a 2-hour drive, so it's not the worst, but it's not necessarily easy. But yeah, for this, it was very much worth it, and I can't wait to do it again. And I'm very sold after listening to Daniel on medicinal mindfulness, and I think I'm going to take a lot of his classes and workshops. So I'll be down there in the Colorado Front Range quite a bit in the future, doing stuff in Boulder with him, and hopefully with the rest of the clubs. So I think that's it for now. If you want to support the show, like us on Facebook, tell your friends. I really appreciate reviews on iTunes or Stitcher or whatever you're using. Just, give us some positive reviews and more people will find us naturally. And if you want to do breath work with me or Kyle, hit us up, psychedelicstoday, email@gmail.com, or just reach out on the contact form on our site and we'll hit you up with whatever you want to know. Thanks all for listening. Really appreciate it. Take care. Psychedelics Today signing off. Bye.